Cars. Humanity has always been pushing the boundaries of transportation for speed and for power. Cars are an art form. They're a source of thrill. They create some of the most intense sports. So, how did we get here? It's the 1920s. There's a big problem. Alcohol is banned. Prohibition has taken away one of America's most loved drinks. So, bootleggers stepped in to fill the gap. The police, however, did their best to stop the influx of illegal alcohol, resulting in high-speed chases. What followed was an arms race of speed between the two. Bootleggers started to upgrade their cars, namely better carburetors, suspension, and intake manifolds. As Prohibition ended, these modified cars, known as rummagers, were soon taken onto the racetrack. Thus, stock car racing was born. As World War II ended, the US was left with a massive manufacturing industry. With no more demand for wartime goods, factories rushed to find work to do. At the same time, massive infrastructure projects like the interstate highway system had started. Both demand and supply exploded, and by the end of the 1950s, more than twice as many cars were on the road as there were at the start of the decade. Cars were now widely available to the public, and with the release of the Oldsmobile Rocket 88, they were fast. The era of muscle cars had arrived. Traditionally, these cars were powered by a V8. Power quickly became a selling point. With the arrival of the Ford Thunderbird, something new swept the industry: superchargers. Engines need air to work, and a common rule to go by is the more air, the more boom. Superchargers function by using the power from your engine to power two screws. These screws suck in air, shoving it down into your engine. Essentially, they act as giant vacuums on top of your engine. As car culture developed into a fully fledged hobby, cars were increasingly ingrained into one's identity. Whether you had the coolest car on the block could now make or break your social standing, and people were willing to pay for it. Year after year, newer, more powerful gas-guzzling cars emerged from the American automobile sector. As cars became more prevalent, other economic sectors started capitalizing on them. Aftermarket modifications quickly became available, bringing power to the masses. Drive-in cinemas and drive-thrus also swept the country, further solidifying cars into US culture. However, the turn of the 1970s saw much more environment-conscious efforts. The Clean Air Act was soon passed, limiting harmful exhaust gases and forcing manufacturers to install catalytic converters on their cars. However, what slayed the muscle car era was
It is an all-out war. That's how Israeli Defense Minister Moshe Dayan describes an invasion of the Golan Heights and the east bank of the Suez by Syria and Egypt.
The oil crisis was in full swing. During the Yom Kippur War, the US had been supplying Israel, which pissed off the rest of the Middle East. In turn, OPEC, the oil cartel, voted to cut off the US from oil. Gas prices immediately shot up, and the clunky 6-mile-per-gallon muscle cars were suddenly impossibly expensive to drive. American manufacturers had placed too much emphasis on power and too little on usability. Across the market, cars were bloated, heavy, and boxy. So, the once fiercely American consumers turned to the Japanese. Japanese cars, known as JDMs, were more agile, they were nimble, they were fuel efficient, and they did all this while destroying the Americans. Japanese cars also birthed a new art form: drifting. In the narrow mountain passes that inhabited Japan, street racers took a different approach to turns. Instead of slowing down, they just went full throttle. Performing a clutch kick to lock up the rear wheels, these street racers would often slide their cars through turns, often teetering at the edge of spinning out. Japanese cars were also insanely easy to modify. Their designs allowed for quick access to all the juicy internals, and their engines were tough, able to comfortably withstand far above what they were rated for. Tuning rose to popularity quite quickly. Sure, a random 1990s Nissan Coupe wouldn't beat a Lamborghini in a drag race, but with a bit of wrench work, it would fly past. Modern hypercars are truly insane. Fueled by a century's worth of research, every last part of these hypercars is taken into consideration. With how fast this industry has progressed, only one thing is true: there is no limit.